What happened when an undercover CEO traded his luxury office for a mop bucket and discovered the truth behind his retreat's toxic culture? Welcome, wonderful listeners. You're about to hear a powerful story of deception, courage, and transformation. This isn't just about a wellness retreat. It's about reclaiming purpose, rebuilding trust, and redefining what healing truly looks like. If you believe that real leadership means showing up, listening, and making things right, then this story will stay with you long after it ends. Let's dive into the incredible journey of a CEO who went undercover and changed everything. Ethan Caldwell sat alone in his glass-walled office at the Sunspire Wellness Retreat, the peaceful chime of wind bells outside doing little to calm his growing unease. His eyes remained locked on the tablet in his lap, where he scrolled through the most recent guest feedback, reviews that felt like blows to the gut. "Humiliating experience," one read. "Only caters to influencers. Real people are invisible here." Another accused a yoga instructor of mocking a guest for her weight. Ethan's heart sank. Sunspire was never meant to become this. Founded years ago with his late partner, the retreat was envisioned as a sanctuary, a refuge where healing came first, where all bodies, all stories, and all journeys were honored. But somewhere along the line, things had changed. A drive for expansion had taken precedence over empathy. The serene environment now seemed like a well-curated illusion masking a hollow interior. He had trusted his leadership team to maintain the retreat's values, but the accusations suggested a deeper rot. What troubled him most was how disconnected he'd become. Guests, once left glowing with gratitude, now they left in tears. Marketing seemed more interested in perfect angles and toned influencers than in transformation or authenticity. Ethan had always believed in wellness as a personal, deeply human journey, not a trend to be commodified. Guilt pressed heavy on his chest. How had he allowed this vision to drift so far? He thought of the guests, people like the grieving, the burned out, the insecure, seeking solace here, only to be met with exclusion and judgment. A public apology or a leadership shuffle wouldn't be enough. He needed to get close to the truth, feel it, breathe it. He needed to understand, not from reports or filtered presentations, but from the ground up. An idea began forming, radical, risky, but undeniable. He would go undercover. Only by living the experience could he rebuild the retreat in his partner's memory and honor the mission they began. The calm that once defined Sunspire was cracking, and Ethan was finally ready to listen. The decision made, Ethan Caldwell wasted no time putting his plan into motion. He called in Ruben Torres, Sunspire's head of security and a longtime confidant. Ruben, a former Marine with a sharp eye and a quiet loyalty, raised an eyebrow at the idea, but didn't laugh. Instead, he listened. Ethan laid it all out. The reviews, the accusations, the betrayal of values, and his desire to go undercover. "You want to be invisible," Ruben said slowly, "not just hidden, unseen." Ethan nodded. "I need to know what's really happening when the spa robes come off and the cameras stop rolling." Within hours, Ruben was working on his transformation. The man known for crisp linen shirts and handcrafted loafers was stripped of polish. His designer stubble became a scruffy beard, his silver-streaked hair was dyed a forgettable brown and tousled with wax to create a receding hairline. Gone were the sleek watches and luxury colognes, replaced by a faint scent of industrial cleaner and an oversized Navy Sunspire Facilities tee. Ethan practiced slouching, altering his gait and lowering his usually commanding voice to something more hesitant, quieter. They chose a new name, Ellie Carver, an everyman with a patchy work history and a quiet disposition. Ruben even created a fake employee profile in the resort's HR system, complete with a fabricated resume listing years in custodial services. Ethan studied janitorial videos late into the night, practicing how to handle mops, buffers, and drain snakes. When he finally looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. The man who stared back wasn't the CEO of a multi-million-dollar retreat. He was someone overlooked in every hallway. The next morning, Ruben picked him up in an old pickup truck with peeling paint, a far cry from Ethan's usual hybrid SUV. They didn't enter through the arched, jasmine-scented guest entrance, but through a service door tucked beside the waste bins. Ethan's new locker smelled of mildew and pine disinfectant. He clipped on his employee badge and punched in. No one recognized him. Staff passed him by with brief glances or none at all. The detachment was startling but necessary. He was Eli now, a man who swept the floors, changed the light bulbs, and kept to himself. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where Ethan would peel back the layers of his own legacy from the shadows. Ellie's first week as a maintenance worker at Sunspire Wellness Retreat was an eye-opening journey through the resort's polished facade. From the outside, everything still glimmered, cascading fountains, ambient music, and smiling staff in perfectly tailored uniforms. But behind the scenes, Ethan saw what guests could only hint at in their reviews. He moved quietly, pushing his squeaky cart past meditation rooms and infrared saunas, always observing. It didn't take long for him to notice the subtle but persistent patterns of exclusion. The resort's star yoga instructor, Chase Donnelly, was charismatic and camera-ready, often surrounded by adoring fans snapping photos mid-pose. But Eli heard the disdain behind Chase's smile when he spoke about guests who didn't photograph well. He made offhand remarks to fellow trainers about low-tier clients, a term that made Ethan's stomach turn. One afternoon, Eli was cleaning the windows near Studio Sol when he witnessed a moment that encapsulated everything wrong. Maya Ruiz, a new guest, with kind eyes and a shy demeanor, had nervously joined her first beginner yoga class. As she struggled to keep up with the flowing poses, Chase gently but firmly repositioned her to the far back corner of the room. He did it under the guise of offering her more space, but the smirk exchanged with a staff member nearby told another story. Maya looked visibly embarrassed, her posture shrinking as the rest of the class flowed confidently at the front. No one offered her reassurance. No one acknowledged her efforts. Eli clenched the handle of his mop, fury rising in his chest. He was beginning to understand the true nature of the problem, not just individual cruelty, but an entire culture designed to prioritize appearances over authenticity. Later that day, he watched Sierra Lane, the resort's social media director, staging a photo shoot in the Zen garden. She directed a group of influencers into perfect formations while subtly steering older, less fit guests out of frame. "We need aspiration, not reality," she told a photographer under her breath, unaware that the janitor nearby was the man who signed her paychecks. The curated tranquility of Sunspire masked something deeply wrong, a hierarchy built on image, not impact. Ethan had once believed the retreat embodied healing. Now he saw it was little more than a stage, and the people who most needed support, guests like Maya, were being pushed into the shadows. As Eli mopped the marble floors and fixed leaking faucets, he realized that the heart of the retreat wasn't just broken, it had been quietly replaced, and he was the only one who could bring it back. Amid the performative smiles and filtered perfection, Eli found an unexpected ally in Lena Moore, a soft-spoken but sharp-witted nutrition coach who still believed in the original mission of Sunspire. Unlike the other staff who either looked through him or barked curt orders, Lena greeted Eli each morning with a genuine smile and a warm, "Hey, new guy." During a shared lunch break in the staff courtyard, hidden behind a row of bamboo planters, Eli finally struck up a real conversation with her. She spoke openly about her concerns with the retreat's shifting priorities. "We used to focus on healing," she said, stirring her salad distractedly. "Now it's about sculpting bodies for Instagram and selling a fantasy that only fits a few." Lena confided that she'd noticed a pattern of subtle punishment for those who didn't conform. Trainers who encouraged body acceptance were denied class slots. Staff who questioned the aesthetic policies were labeled difficult. Sierra Lane, in particular, had created a culture of curated visibility. Anyone who didn't look like a magazine cover simply didn't exist in the world of Sunspire's marketing. "They say it's about aspiration," Lena muttered, "but it's really just erasure." Eli nodded, keeping his identity hidden but his empathy clear. Lena's quiet resistance encouraging all body types in her nutrition workshops, sneaking inclusive tips into her meal plans, was a rare ember of the old Sunspire, still glowing beneath the surface. She admitted she'd considered quitting more than once, but stayed out of loyalty to the guests who truly needed support. "There's a woman here, Maya," Lena said, lowering her voice. "She came here hoping to rebuild herself, but after the way Chase treated her, I don't know if she'll ever feel safe in that studio again." Eli listened intently, anger simmering just below the surface. Lena's words confirmed what he had suspected. The retreat's leadership didn't just overlook guests like Maya. They actively pushed them aside to preserve an illusion. That evening, as Eli returned to his maintenance route, he couldn't shake Lena's quiet determination. She didn't have a platform, but she had integrity. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone. In the shadows of the wellness empire he had built, Ethan began to realize that the foundation hadn't completely crumbled. There were still people within these walls who believed in healing over performance. People like Lena. If Sunspire was to be saved, it would be through them. And he was ready to fight beside them. The illusion of peace at Sunspire began to unravel one quiet afternoon during a sound bath session. Eli had been fixing a flickering light in the hallway outside the meditation dome when he noticed Maya Ruiz slipping out of the room, her posture stiff, her face flushed with emotion. Something was wrong. He hesitated for a moment, then followed her at a distance until he found her sitting alone on a bench near the koi pond, her shoulders hunched and her eyes brimming with tears. She didn't notice him at first, and when she did, she quickly looked away, embarrassed. "Sorry," she murmured, "just needed some air." Eli, still in character as the quiet maintenance man, gently asked if she was okay. What spilled out of her wasn't just a single bad experience. It was a dam of disappointment finally breaking. She had come to Sunspire hoping to heal after a painful divorce, craving solace and self-discovery, but instead of support, she had been met with cold smiles, judgmental glances, and subtle exclusion. "They talk about transformation," she said, "but they only mean if you already look the part." Eli listened, his heart aching as she described being moved to the back of the yoga studio, ignored by instructors, and left feeling invisible. Her voice trembled. "I thought this place was supposed to help me feel strong again. I just feel small." Eli wanted to scream, to march back into that studio and call out Chase for his smug elitism, to confront the marketing team for using people like Maya as background props in someone else's fantasy. But he couldn't, not yet. He was still Eli, the janitor. Instead, he offered her quiet reassurance. "You're not the one who's broken," he said gently. "This place is." His words, though subtle, seemed to land. She gave a tiny nod, as if grateful just to be seen. Later that day, Eli overheard Chase joking with another instructor about dead weight in the back rows. The laughter that followed burned into Ethan's memory like acid. The culture at Sunspire wasn't just flawed, it was cruel. And people like Maya, who had come seeking healing, were being shamed instead. As he pushed his cart down the stone pathway back to the maintenance shed, the calm of the resort felt increasingly artificial, its serenity cracked beyond repair. The real work, he realized, was only beginning. Ellie had seen enough to know that the sickness at Sunspire wasn't isolated to a few careless comments. It was systemic, strategic, and quietly enforced. But witnessing it wasn't enough. He needed proof. So, late one evening after his shift, under the cover of dimmed hallway lights and muffled spa music, he made his move. With a universal keycard discreetly handed to him by Ruben, Eli slipped into the administrative wing, where the marketing and operations offices sat behind bamboo-latticed glass doors. His heart pounded as he entered Sierra Lane's office, an immaculate space that smelled of eucalyptus and ambition. He opened the desk drawers and quickly found a labeled folder, Engagement and Client Visibility Strategy. Inside were memos explicitly instructing staff to feature only aesthetically aspirational clients on Sunspire's social media feeds, with handwritten notes suggesting minimize appearance of guests outside of brand body standard. Ellie snapped photos of every page with his burner phone. Then he moved to the corner where a company laptop sat open in sleep mode. Lifting the keyboard slightly, he found the password taped underneath, Zen for Life. He logged in and navigated to Sierra's email. What he uncovered made his blood boil. Threads between Sierra and Chase mocking guest photos, strategizing how to crop out unflattering angles, and joking about creating before and before collages for untransformable clients. One email in particular referenced Maya directly. "Do not include the crying yoga lady in any content. Total buzzkill." The cruelty was astonishing, but the worst was yet to come. Eli dug deeper into system files and discovered performance evaluations punishing trainers like Lena for low visibility engagement and rewarding others based on client photo potential rather than actual wellness results. There were even internal emails where Sierra had referred to Lena as emotionally fragile and a potential PR liability for advocating inclusivity. All of it, every bit of this curated image, was built not on empowerment, but on exploitation. With trembling fingers, Ethan transferred everything to a flash drive. Emails, marketing briefs, policy templates, even drafts of digitally altered transformation photos. This wasn't mismanagement. It was a full-blown betrayal of everything Sunspire claimed to stand for. As he powered down the computer and carefully restored the office to its original state, Eli looked around one last time. The warm lighting and serene decor now felt like camouflage for something rotten. He tucked the flash drive into his sock, heart pounding not just from the fear of getting caught, but from the realization that the time for watching was over. The truth was no longer hidden, and soon neither would he be. The next morning, tension buzzed through the air as staff received an unexpected message. Mandatory meeting at 9 a.m. in the Serenity Hall, no exceptions. Whispers rippled through the retreat. Some assumed it was a surprise audit. Others suspected a guest had lodged a major complaint. No one was prepared for what came next. As the team gathered in the minimalist meeting space surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows and bonsai arrangements, a man in faded coveralls stepped forward. At first, no one recognized him. Then the truth struck like lightning. "My name is Ethan Caldwell," he announced, pulling off his maintenance cap. Gasps echoed around the room. Chase Donnelly's jaw tightened. Sierra Lane's eyes narrowed in alarm, and Lena's breath caught in her throat, a flicker of understanding dawning across her face. Ethan's voice was calm but resolute. "For the past several weeks, I've been working undercover here at Sunspire, not as your CEO, but as your maintenance man. I needed to see for myself what this retreat has become." He reached to the side and lifted a file box onto a table, and what I found is deeply disturbing. He began presenting printed emails, memos, and screenshots, each one damning. He exposed the discriminatory marketing strategies, the performance metrics that prioritized aesthetics over actual well-being, and the internal discussions mocking guests who didn't fit the resort's curated image. Maya's mistreatment, Lena's targeted evaluations, and the deliberate marginalization of anyone deemed off-brand were laid bare. Sierra shifted in her seat, her polished composure cracking. Chase tried to interject, "Ethan, we were just doing what worked for the brand," but Ethan cut him off. "You were exploiting people's insecurities for profit, and you did it in the name of a wellness retreat built on healing." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Ethan's final words. "Effective immediately, both of you are terminated." The security personnel, already stationed at the doors, stepped forward. Sierra protested weakly, and Chase stood frozen, his perfect facade unraveling, but there was no room for debate. As they were escorted out, Ethan turned back to the rest of the staff. His expression softened. "To those of you who tried to speak up, who remained kind and true to our mission, thank you. Sunspire isn't beyond saving, but we must start over, with honesty and integrity." A stunned hush settled over the room, but within it, seeds of hope were beginning to take root. The truth had been revealed, and a new chapter was about to begin. The days following the reveal were a whirlwind of restructuring, healing, and reckoning. With Chase and Sierra gone, Ethan wasted no time initiating a full-scale culture reset at Sunspire. His first act was to promote Lena Moore to the newly created position of Director of Inclusive Wellness, a role that would shape the retreat's future from the inside out. Her compassion, insight, and quiet strength had been the retreat's moral backbone for years, and now she had the authority to lead meaningful change. Lena began by organizing training workshops focused on body neutrality, trauma-informed coaching, and empathy-centered guest care. Classes were redesigned to accommodate all levels, and wellness programs were expanded to include mental health support, group storytelling circles, and movement sessions for seniors and those with limited mobility. Ethan, no longer a shadow in coveralls, made himself visible in every corner of the retreat, not just in boardrooms, but on the gym floor, in group meditations, and during meal prep sessions. He worked side by side with staff, learning, listening, and emphasizing that Sunspire was no longer about perfection, it was about progress. Marketing materials were pulled and replaced with real, untouched photographs of guests and staff. The new campaign would no longer promise transformation by society's standards, but celebration of every individual's journey, whether it was 1 pound lost or 1 barrier overcome. Perhaps the most symbolic gesture came when Ethan personally reached out to Maya Ruiz, inviting her back to Sunspire, this time as a collaborator, not just a guest. Hesitant at first, Maya eventually agreed and returned with newfound resolve. She shared her story in a private session attended by staff and guests alike, her voice shaking at first but growing steadier with each word. Her vulnerability sparked something powerful. For the first time, the retreat felt truly communal, a place not of exclusion, but connection. Ethan knew the journey ahead would not be easy. Trust had to be rebuilt, mindsets had to shift, but for the first time in years, Sunspire felt alive again, not as a brand, but as a beacon. He looked around and saw staff exchanging ideas, guests laughing without self-consciousness, and a shared determination to do better. The retreat wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough to start over. Months later, the transformation of Sunspire Wellness Retreat culminated in the launch of its bold new initiative, Wellness for Everybody. The courtyard buzzed with anticipation as guests, staff, and community partners gathered beneath a canopy of lantern-lit trees. Banners lined the walkways, not of flawless models, but of real people. Seniors in gentle yoga poses, plus-size guests laughing during water aerobics, and Maya Ruiz, now a radiant symbol of courage, beaming mid-dance in a Zumba class. The campaign celebrated resilience, joy, and personal growth, not aesthetic perfection. It was a direct rejection of the glossy, exclusionary branding that had once defined the retreat. Standing at the back of the crowd, Ethan Caldwell watched quietly as Lena Moore took the stage to open the event. Her voice rang with pride as she spoke about redefining wellness, honoring all bodies, and creating a space where healing belonged to everyone. Ethan caught sight of Maya mingling confidently with other guests, her presence magnetic. She waved at him, and he smiled, remembering the woman who once cried behind the meditation dome and now stood proudly as a face of change. Workshops throughout the day invited guests to explore movement without judgment, eat mindfully without shame, and tell their stories in safe, welcoming circles. The new brochure didn't advertise six-pack abs. It shared testimonials of renewed self-worth, restored confidence, and reclaimed joy. Sunspire had become more than a retreat. It had become a movement. As dusk settled over the gardens and lanterns glowed like fireflies, Ethan finally stepped forward. "This place was always meant to be a refuge," he said, voice thick with emotion, "and today, it finally is. Not because it's perfect, but because it's honest." Applause filled the air, not for a CEO, but for a shared mission. Ethan glanced around, taking in the mosaic of faces, diverse, imperfect, beautiful, and new. The journey was far from over, but the course had been set. The damage had been acknowledged, the truth spoken aloud. And from it, something stronger had emerged. A sanctuary built not on aspiration but on authenticity and belonging. Wellness, at last, was for everybody. The story of Sunspire Wellness Retreat teaches a powerful lesson about the dangers of losing sight of purpose in pursuit of image and profit. What began as a sanctuary for healing and self-acceptance had slowly transformed into a place driven by curated perfection, where only those who fit a narrow definition of beauty were celebrated. The CEO, Ethan Caldwell, learned that true leadership requires presence, humility, and accountability, not just delegation and distance. By going undercover, he confronted the uncomfortable truth that systems of exclusion can thrive even in places meant for compassion, and that silence from leadership can allow harm to take root. But the most meaningful takeaway is this: real change starts with seeing people, their struggles, their efforts, their worth, beyond the surface. It's about creating environments where everyone, regardless of size, age, or ability, feels welcome and empowered. Through vulnerability, empathy, and bold action, Ethan and his team proved that it's never too late to course correct. The transformation of Sunspire reminds us that wellness is not a look. It's a feeling, and every person deserves access to it just as they are. When we return to our values, we don't just rebuild systems, we restore humanity.